Cook County Courthouse always smelled like cardboard and regret. At 2:30 in the afternoon, the hallway outside courtroom 3B felt colder than winter, even under fluorescent lights. I sat on a bench that had carried 1,000 other endings, my thumb tracing the edge of a paperclip like it could hold my life together. The divorce packet sat on my lap, heavy for something made of ink and thin pages. Initial here, sign here, date here. My name printed beside Adam Pierce's, like we were still a pair. His lawyer had delivered the stack with a polite face and eyes that stayed on her watch. She didn't have to say it out loud. Adam was not coming. I kept staring at the courtroom door anyway, waiting for footsteps that would never turn into his. That was the humiliating part, not the divorce, not the paperwork, but the tiny stubborn hope I hadn't killed yet. Why did I still expect him to show? After the late nights, the canceled plans, the way his phone always faced down, I still imagined he might appear and look sorry. My purse was on the floor beside my shoe, zipped tight like it held something illegal. It did. A pregnancy test, wrapped in tissues and buried under old receipts. 2 days earlier, at 3 a.m., I had stood barefoot in my bathroom, watching 2 pink lines bloom like an answer I wasn't ready for. I remembered gripping the sink so hard my knuckles turned white, whispering my own name to stay real. Claire Morgan. Still Claire, even before the judge said so. The test should have been joy. It should have been a call to my sister, a laugh through tears, a plan. Instead, it felt like a match struck in a room full of gas. And Adam had already chosen someone else. He'd already chosen the version of his life that didn't include me. A baby would not change his mind. It would only chain me to a man who had proven how easily he could walk away. What kind of mother starts with a secret? The bailiff called my name, and my body moved on reflex. I gathered the papers against my chest like armor and stepped into the stream of strangers. Couples passed me without seeing me. Lawyers murmured into headsets. I took 3 steps and collided with someone solid. Not a person, a wall dressed in charcoal wool. My papers flew, sliding across the floor like fallen leaves. I dropped to my knees, breath snagging, and my hand went to my stomach before my brain could stop it. Then I looked up. He was stillness in human form. Dark hair combed back. A face cut sharp enough to draw blood, and eyes so black they made the hallway lights feel dim. Sandalwood clung to him, warm and expensive, and underneath it was something metallic I couldn't name. 2 men stood behind him, not quite guards, not quite shadows, but the way they scanned the corridor made my skin prickle. He crouched too, as if the floor didn't offend him, and collected my scattered pages with precise fingers. A ring flashed once, engraved with a crest I didn't recognize. Our hands brushed when we reached for the same sheet, and for one stupid second my pulse forgot fear and jumped straight to something stranger. His gaze flicked over the paperwork. I watched his expression change by millimeters, the way a storm forms without warning. Adam Pierce. He didn't say the name like a stranger. He said it like a problem he'd been waiting to solve. In that instant, I understood the silence in the courthouse hallway wasn't empty. It was watched. He rose and offered the papers back. The air around him felt owned, like space that belonged to him before he even entered it. With a small motion of his hand, his men shifted, giving me a pocket of privacy that felt like a trap. His eyes held mine, and the message landed without needing words. My divorce was not just my divorce. He slid a business card into my palm. Thick stock, edges crisp, the kind of card that didn't bend. There was no name, only a number embossed in silver and a crowned lion holding a sword. My fingers curled around it like it could keep me upright. Then he was gone, footsteps measured, unhurried, as if the building had been constructed for him. The clerk called me into courtroom 3B and I signed until my wrist ached. 12 minutes later, I walked back out as Claire Morgan again, legally untethered, secretly pregnant, carrying a card that felt like a brand. Outside, the sunlight hit too hard. The city kept moving as if nothing had happened. I tucked the card deep into my pocket and told myself I was heading somewhere safe, back to my neighborhood cafe in Little Italy, back to espresso and familiar faces. But as I started down the courthouse steps, I had the unmistakable feeling that someone, somewhere, had already started following my story. Teresa's Deli on Taylor Street was the closest thing I had to a home that didn't ask questions. The bell over the door chimed, and the smell of espresso and baked bread wrapped around me like a blanket. The walls were crowded with old family photos, cousins and weddings and babies held up to the camera like proof that love could last. Nonna Teresa Marino stood behind the counter with flour on her sleeves, arguing with a radio that never played loud enough. When she saw my face, her eyes softened, and for a moment, I remembered how it felt to be cared for. I tied on an apron and forced my hands to stop shaking. Luca Moretti's card sat in my pocket, its embossed crowned lion digging into my thigh like a warning I couldn't throw away. The pregnancy test was still buried in my purse, wrapped in tissues as if that could keep the truth quiet. 2 days ago, at 3 a.m., I'd watched those pink lines appear and realized my life now belonged to more than my own fear. I served coffee, smiled at regulars, and kept thinking, how fast can safety disappear? What do you do when you're the price for someone else's mistake? Outside the front window, the neighborhood moved the way it always did. Delivery bikes, strollers, a guy carrying a box of tomatoes for the restaurant next door. But a dark sedan had been parked across the street too long, engine running like it was waiting for a signal. I told myself I was jumpy because of the courthouse, because Adam hadn't shown, because my body was holding too many secrets. Then the bell chimed again and the air shifted. 3 men walked in, wearing cheap suits that didn't fit right. None of them looked at the menu. Their eyes scanned exits, counted tables, measured the kitchen door. Predators don't browse pastries. I set down the coffee pot and felt my pulse climb. The man in front approached the counter with a smile that stayed on his mouth and nowhere else. He said my name like he'd practiced it, then added Adam Pierce's last name like it was still mine. I didn't correct him out loud. I couldn't risk sounding defiant when I didn't understand the rules. Behind him, the other 2 spread out, blocking the doorway and the path to the kitchen without making a scene. The deli felt smaller, and I hated that my first instinct was to apologize for existing. They weren't here for food. They were here because Adam owed someone, and I was the easiest thing attached to him. The leader spoke about an employer as if hierarchy was a law of nature. Then he dropped the number into my chest. $300,000. I couldn't imagine it, not on my paycheck, not ever. He reminded me my divorce wasn't final. 30 days until the decree. Until then, in their eyes, I was still a piece of Adam's name, a place to apply pressure. Anger flared so hot I tasted it, because Adam vanished and left me standing in his mess. I tried to think like a grown woman instead of a scared girl. I told myself there had to be a way to explain I knew nothing, that I had signed the papers, that Adam and I were done. But the leader watched me like he already knew what I would say. His patience thinned. That was when Nonna Teresa stormed out from the kitchen, small and furious, gripping a rolling pin like she could beat the world back into place. Her voice rose, demanding they leave her shop. My stomach dropped. Brave people get hurt first. One of the men made a subtle motion near his jacket, and the room went quiet in the worst way. My hand slid to my stomach before I could stop it. Instinct over logic. A promise to the baby no one knew about. I stepped between Nonna and the counter, heart hammering, and chose the least terrible option. I signaled I would go with them. Not because I believed them, but because I believed Nonna would fight until she bled. I begged her with my eyes to call Haley Carter, my sister, to tell her I was taken, to tell her not to come alone, to tell her I loved her. I kept my face calm and my breath steady, because panic is loud, and loud gets punished. I untied my apron and left it on the counter like I'd be back. The leader guided me to the door with a hand that never touched but never felt far. The bell chimed as we stepped into bright afternoon sun. People passed laughing, arguing, staring at screens, living ordinary lives. No one noticed me being escorted away by 3 strangers. The dark sedan waited at the curb. I slid into the back seat, breathed in stale smoke and cleaner, and listened to the door close with a soft, final click. That click was my nightmare starting to move towards somewhere I couldn't see. Sunlight hit the windshield like nothing was wrong. People kept walking past the curb, headphones on, grocery bags swinging, laughing at private jokes. I slid into the back seat and the door shut with a soft latch. My deli disappeared behind tinted glass in seconds, and my heart started screaming. The air inside smelled of stale smoke and chemical cleaner, the kind used on floors after something ugly. The man beside me took my wrists and cinched a plastic tie. Not tight enough to bruise, just final. My phone stayed in my purse. All unreachable as the engine hummed, we rolled. I forced my breathing into a slow pattern, in through my nose, out through my mouth, like I was back in yoga class before bills and heartbreak. I watched streetlight rhythms through the tint, counted left turns, and tried to memorize every bump in the road in case I survived. My hand kept drifting to my stomach, a reflex I couldn't afford to explain. How do you protect a baby no one knows exists? How do you scream when no one is listening? I swallowed the panic and told myself I only needed one thing: time to breathe and plan. Nonna Teresa's face flashed in my mind, stubborn and furious, the rolling pin raised like a flag. I pictured her alone behind the counter, calling my sister, cursing Adam, praying over my name. The guilt burned hotter than fear. I'd walked out to save her, now I had to survive. The men spoke casually, as if kidnapping was a Tuesday chore. They repeated $300,000 like it was pocket change, and they kept saying Adam Pierce would understand consequences. I listened for accents, for names, for clues. Their voices held contempt, not urgency, which terrified me because contempt is their comfort. We moved west, then south, the scenery sliding from cafes and murals into brick warehouses and dead lots. Train horns sounded far away. The tires changed song on rougher asphalt. I kept my eyes on reflections, trying to catch street names in passing, building a map in my head fast. If Adam won't pay, what am I worth to strangers? The questions circled like a vulture. I hated that my mind went there, hated that I did the math in my head as if I were inventory. And then I remembered the tiny heartbeat, and my anger hardened into steel today. The driver mentioned Kozlov under his breath, and the man beside me answered with a word I'd heard only in crime shows: Bratva. My stomach went cold. This wasn't a divorce mess or a petty loan. Adam hadn't borrowed. He'd stolen from people who called violence a business model, apparently. Luca Moretti's face flashed in my mind, the way his eyes tightened when he saw Adam's name. He'd known. Or suspected. The card in my pocket felt miles away, useless without a phone. I wondered if he'd planned to intervene, or if fate just moved faster than me all along. The leader leaned close enough that I felt his breath, and his tone turned practical, like a salesman listing alternatives. If Adam stalled, there were other ways to recover money. He didn't say how in detail, but his meaning landed heavy. My skin prickled. My baby kicked in my imagination. I nodded when they expected compliance, because refusal was a luxury. Inside, I bargained with everything I believed in. Let Nonna be safe. Let Haley call police. or anyone. Let my body stay quiet. I studied their hands, their watches, their habits. People slip when they think you are broken. The car slowed, turned through a maze of chain-link fences and graffiti, and stopped beside a building with no sign. A rusted roll-up door waited like a mouth. The men opened my door, and the cold air hit my face. Somewhere water dripped steadily, counting seconds I couldn't see. They guided me inside. My bound wrists held low so strangers wouldn't notice if anyone did pass. The warehouse was empty. Concrete floor, metal beams, shadows. In the center sat a single chair under a hanging work light. The circle of brightness looked staged, like a scene waiting for actors. They pushed me toward the chair, then hovered around the edges of the light, smoking and watching. I sat because standing felt like defiance. One man made a call and spoke, the syllables hard and clipped. I caught the idea of a boss arriving, someone who wanted to handle this. Time stretched. My wrist tingled under the tie, and my mouth tasted like pennies. I stared at the warehouse door, the same way I'd stared at courtroom 3B, waiting for someone who would decide my future. The difference was that here, hope felt dangerous. Here, mercy had a price tag. Then the roll-up door screamed, metal on metal, and every man in the room straightened. Footsteps crossed the concrete with a rhythm I hadn't heard, steady and unhurried, like ownership. The hairs on my arms rose. I didn't know who was coming, but my body understood power before mine did. The chair sat in the center of the warehouse like a spotlighted confession. I perched on it with my wrists bound, listening to water drip somewhere in the dark. Every breath scraped my throat. I kept my hand pressed low on my stomach, promising us we would endure no matter. The men ringed the light, smoking, shifting, checking the roll-up door as if it owed them answers. One tapped his phone, impatient, then glanced at me like I was a receipt. In their world, I was not Claire Morgan. I was collateral, still warm and still breathing on borrowed time. I tried to stay human by counting sounds: drip, inhale, exhale, distant traffic. I wondered what I had done to deserve being priced like meat. How do you keep dignity when strangers decide your value? How do you protect a baby you cannot even name aloud inside this concrete tomb? They kept returning to the number, $300,000, as if repeating it would make it appear. They talked about my divorce clock, 30 days until a judge stamped finality. I had signed, but paper moves slowly. To them, I was still attached to Adam Pierce's mess, and that made me useful. The hardest truth was simple. Adam would not come. He had skipped the courthouse without blinking, so he would skip this too. I felt anger rise, sharp and clean, because he didn't just leave me. He left me exposed to wolves, and my unborn child was trapped with me here. When the door screamed, the smoke halted midair. Boots crossed concrete with a calm rhythm that didn't match the captor's jitter. The men around me straightened like soldiers. I looked up, expecting another monster, and recognized the silhouette before I saw his face because I had met that stillness earlier. Luca Moretti stepped into the circle of light as if the warehouse belonged to him. Sandalwood reached me first, then that marble-carved composure. His men fanned out behind him, quiet and ready. The captors suddenly looked smaller, like they'd misread the map and walked straight into the wrong territory tonight. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His gaze swept the room, then locked on me with a flash of recognition that felt like a claim. I understood the courthouse collision had meaning. Adam Pierce's name had put me on Luca's radar, and it stayed there all day. One captor tried to talk himself tall, insisting I was leverage, and insisting debts belonged to their side. Luca's posture didn't change. He made a small gesture and his men shifted, hands near jackets, eyes cold. The message landed. This negotiation was already over, and it was not theirs anymore either. I heard numbers thrown like stones. The captors wanted their $300,000 and a lesson for Adam. Luca offered something larger, almost careless. $500,000, plus enough extra to make their pride swallow. He treated money like a door key, buying my release with a calm that terrified me more than shouting. A man approached with a blade to cut the tie at my wrists. My whole body flinched. Luca's eyes darkened, and even without words, I felt the warning in the air. Be careful. The plastic snapped free. Blood returned to my fingers in pins and fire, and I fought tears. Luca extended a hand, I not as a question but as a path. I stood on shaking legs and stepped to him because staying meant being reclaimed by strangers. He drew me behind his frame, a living shield. One of his men placed a coat on my shoulders, cashmere warm, suddenly protective. Luca spoke about Adam Pierce as if he were caught. He told them the debt would be handled by him, and that any grievance should travel to his doorstep, not mine. The captors exchanged looks, weighing pride against survival. Their shoulders eased. I understood they feared him more than anyone. He guided me toward the exit, his hand near my back without gripping, a restraint that felt practiced. Outside, daylight looked fake after concrete darkness. A black armored SUV waited, clean as a promise. His men formed a circle as we walked. I could feel eyes on me, measuring still. I climbed inside because my knees wouldn't carry me anywhere else. Luca slid in beside me, filling the space. The door closed with a hiss that sounded like fate sealing. Relief loosened my chest, then fear tightened it again. Had he saved me, or had he chosen me like property? He told the driver to take us to his home, and the words sounded final in his mouth. My stomach flipped under the coat. I didn't know where that home was, only that the city slid away behind tinted glass. I held my breath, listening to the engine all night. We drove into quieter streets where hedges replaced chain link and cameras blinked from stone pillars. Security lights washed over iron gates set far back from the road. Somewhere ahead, an estate waited, beautiful and sealed. I pressed my palm to my stomach and wondered what rules came with protection. The SUV smelled of leather and disinfectant, and Luca's coat sat heavy on my shoulders, warm where fear had been. My hands still tingled from the plastic tie. I breathed slower and asked myself when safety starts feeling like permission, like a contract I never signed inside this black room. Outside, Chicago slid past in blurred stripes. Rusted fences and shuttered docks faded into quieter streets lined with maples, then into neighborhoods where every driveway had cameras. Sirens disappeared. The city's noise softened into controlled silence, the kind money buys. I watched gates appear like punctuation marks at every turn. We stopped at an iron entrance set back from the road. Guards stepped out. Polite faces, hard eyes, checking mirrors under the vehicle as if even shadows could hide danger. Luca didn't look at them, and they looked at him. The gate opened, and my stomach tightened again without my permission. The estate rose from manicured lawns like a museum that decided to breathe. Stone walls, arched windows, and a fountain that glittered too brightly after the warehouse darkness. Roses climbed trellises along the path. The flowers felt almost insulting, as if beauty could erase what happened an hour ago today. Inside, the air changed. Marble cooled the soles of my shoes, and every sound echoed as if the house listened back. Men in dark suits moved with quiet purpose, never blocking me, never leaving me alone. No one said rules aloud, but the hallways spoke them anyway in steady whispers. Luca walked beside me like nothing in the world could surprise him. That calm was its own kind of threat, because it meant he had already pictured every outcome. When he glanced at my wrists, his expression tightened, then smoothed, as if emotions were tools he stored away on command. In a quiet corridor lined with paintings, He finally let the truth land. Adam Pierce had stolen $5 million from him. Not money meant for banks, but money meant for men who never forget. Hearing that number made my lungs shrink. My divorce wasn't an ending. It was a spark too. I understood why the Bratva men wanted me. I was the easiest piece of Adam they could grab. Rage rose, sharp as glass, because he hadn't just betrayed me with another woman. He had dragged me into a war I never agreed to fight. My hand covered my belly again. Valerie Romano met us near the staircase, hair pinned back, posture crisp, eyes that missed nothing. She looked like a housekeeper only in uniform, not in power. Luca spoke to her in low Italian, and she nodded, then turned to me with a professional gentleness that felt rehearsed for emergencies. She guided me through doors into the east wing, quieter than the rest of the house. A suite waited with soft lamps, clean sheets, and a balcony over gardens. Valerie showed me a phone and explained the buttons with efficiency, making it sound like help, not monitoring when fear returned. The doors were beautiful, heavy, and they closed with a softness that made me shiver. I could walk the room, the bathroom, the balcony, but I felt the boundary like an invisible rope. 2 guards stood somewhere outside, close enough to hear. Even Comfort had surveillance stitched into it tonight. Luca didn't tell me I was trapped. He simply acted as if leaving was impossible until he said otherwise. He mentioned enemies, schedules, and how quickly rumors travel. His certainty pressed against my ribs like a hand. Protection, I realized, came with proximity, and proximity came with control for now. At some point, my purse reappeared on a table, as if the house had swallowed it and returned only what it approved. My keys were there, lipstick, receipts, and the pregnancy test hidden under tissues. Luca's card stayed in my pocket. I touched it and felt the lion's edges bite. Luca arranged a doctor without asking, and I hated how relieved I felt. He noticed the marks on my wrists and the tension in my shoulders. He said his physician would come soon to make I was unharmed. That word soon tightened my throat for reasons he could not see. When he left, the suite swallowed me in quiet. I opened the wardrobe and found hung clothes in many sizes, like the house expected women to arrive. The fabric smelled of cedar and detergent. I sat on the bed and tried calling Haley, explaining I was here without sounding insane. Outside my door, guards walked a loop, their footsteps steady like a metronome. I lay awake thinking of Nonna Teresa and Haley, hoping they believed I was alive. My baby felt like a secret lantern inside me. In this house, secrets expired fast, and I could feel the deadline approaching. A soft knock came. Valerie announced the doctor had arrived. My hand flew to my stomach. In this beautiful house, privacy shrank fast. I stood, smoothed Luca's coat, and walked to the door, knowing the next minutes would ask questions my body could not dodge. Even if I stayed silent. Morning never really arrived in the East Wing. It just turned the lamps pale. I sat on the edge of the bed, Luca's coat folded beside me like proof last night happened, while guards' footsteps paced the hallway in steady loops. My wrists were clean now, but my nerves still felt tied. How long can a secret stay hidden when your own body is changing? If protection comes from the man your ex betrayed, what does truth cost? I tried to look like a guest. A soft knock came, followed by Valerie Romano's composed presence. She did not ask if I wanted company. She informed me the doctor was here, as if my fear had been added to the schedule. I nodded because nodding was easier than admitting I felt cornered. The suite smelled of jasmine from the garden, but suddenly it also smelled like antiseptic and control. I hated how quickly this house could reach into my skin and call it care before I even learned its breathing rules. Dr. DeSantis was small, neat, and calm in a way that made the armed world outside my door feel unreal. He checked my wrists, asked about dizziness, looked at the faint marks like they were weather, not violence. His hands were gentle, his voice measured, and I found myself answering too honestly because kindness disarms me faster than threats. When he asked about nausea, I blamed stress, blamed shock, blamed the divorce. I did not mention 3 a.m. or 2 pink lines kept hidden away. He asked about my last period with the same clinical tone he used for pulse and temperature. My throat tightened and my fingers drifted to my stomach before I could stop them. He noticed everything. He offered to confirm what he suspected, in emphasizing permission, confidentiality, and choice. For a second, I wanted to say no, to keep the secret just mine a little longer. But secrets already had a countdown, and my body was louder than my pride. I nodded, and the room went still. The test was quick, almost ordinary, and that ordinariness scared me more than the warehouse. Dr. DeSantis told me I was pregnant, about 7 weeks, and his calm smile made it real in a new way. I felt wonder and grief collide, as if I were mourning the life I thought I'd have while meeting the life growing inside me. Adam's child, my child, a future with no map. My eyes burned. I pressed my palm to my belly and promised we would make it. When he packed up his bag, I asked what Luca needed to know, and I hated how the question revealed I lived by Luca's rules. Doctor, DeSantis reminded me his duty was confidentiality unless danger demanded otherwise. But he also warned that Luca valued honesty like money. Luca would notice patterns. Luca would protect what he considered under his roof. If I tried to hide the pregnancy, it would surface anyway, and betrayal of silence could be worse than truth. He urged me to speak. After he left, I stepped onto the balcony. The garden below was too perfect, jasmine climbing stone like it belonged. From this height, the estate looked peaceful, and that peace felt like a lie. I was here because strangers priced my life. I set both hands on my stomach and admitted what I wouldn't tell my sister. I did not know how to be a mother, who to trust, or what Luca would do when he learned the baby was Adam's, and it terrified me. The doors behind me opened without sound. I didn't turn at first because I recognized Luca the way you recognize thunder before rain. He asked whether the doctor cleared me, and his eyes tracked every tremor I failed to hide. I told him I was fine, even though fine was a costume. He stepped closer, not touching, but filling the space until my breath shortened. He studied my face like he was solving a problem he owned. I almost confessed then. My throat locked tight. His gaze dropped just once to the place my hands kept returning. I pulled them away too fast, and that flinch betrayed me. Luca didn't accuse, but his attention sharpened. He spoke about patterns and tells, about how people reveal themselves while trying to hide. I felt seen like glass. Before I could gather courage, a phone rang. Luca checked it and his face hardened. He brushed a knuckle near my wrist, and then turned away, switching into business and leaving my secret burning until dinner. When his footsteps faded, the balcony felt colder. Garden lights blinked in the hedges, steady and indifferent. I pressed both hands to my stomach and listened to the estate's security rhythms beyond the door. Dinner became a clock in my head. I had hours to decide how to tell Luca, how to keep my baby safe, how to stay honest without begging. I inhaled jasmine and made myself a promise. The truth would come from my mouth, not his deductions. Tonight I would say it. Night in Luca Moretti's estate felt heavier than the warehouse ever did, because here the danger wore manners. The dining room could have held 20 people, yet only 2 place settings waited beneath a chandelier that looked like frozen light. Valerie had put me in a simple dress and smoothed my hair as if she could iron my fear flat, but I still felt like I was wearing a costume. The house was quiet in the way a predator goes quiet before it moves. How do you confess something that can change your fate? What if the man protecting you is also the man your ex betrayed? Luca arrived without hurry, a dark silhouette against warm lamps. He didn't ask if I was ready. He simply made readiness inevitable. He moved with that same controlled calm that had turned the warehouse into his territory, and my stomach clenched as if it remembered every second. When he sat across from me, the space between us felt like a courtroom aisle. I could feel him watching, not rudely, just completely, as if my face was a document he meant to understand. I had promised myself I would speak before he read it out of me, before his world decided the story for me. Honesty was the last piece of control I owned. If I stayed silent, I would be lying in a house built on consequences, and lies here did not expire gently. I inhaled, felt my pulse in my throat, and let the truth rise without drama, the way you step into cold water on purpose so you do not slip. I told him the doctor confirmed what I already knew. I was pregnant, about 7 weeks. The words landed in the room like a dropped glass, loud even without sound. I told him Adam Pierce did not know, and that I had not planned to tell him after the way he left. I had taken the test at 3 a.m., 2 days before the courthouse, and I had watched my future rearrange itself without asking permission. I admitted why I hid it. I was afraid of becoming leverage, afraid the baby would be used like a bargaining chip the way I had been used. I was afraid Adam would treat an innocent life like an inconvenience, the way he treated me. So I signed the divorce papers anyway, swallowed my pride, and decided I would disappear into a smaller life and raise this child alone. Not because it was easy, but because it was cleaner than begging a man to stay. When I finished, I didn't look away. I offered Luca a choice I could barely breathe around. If my pregnancy changed his calculation, he could send me away. I could accept help without accepting ownership. I would not be shamed for carrying my husband's child, and I would not be treated like property just because he paid $500,000 to pull me out of a warehouse. I said it in my head first, then let my face say it for me, steady and shaking at once. Luca went blank, silent long enough for my pulse to roar, then his gaze decided. He did not deny how possessive his protection was. He simply reframed it. The baby was part of me, and because he had claimed responsibility for me, he was claiming responsibility for what I carried too. He made it clear he would not punish me for Adam's betrayal. If anything, Adam had forfeited the right to touch this part of my life. Luca's calm did not soften, but it steadied, and that steadiness felt like a hand under my ribs. I pushed back where I could. I needed time to process, time to breathe without feeling watched by fate. I needed him to understand that safety meant nothing if I didn't choose it. Luca agreed in his way. Time was mine, but he wanted it spent here, under his roof, on where his security could keep us out of reach. It was a compromise and a boundary at once, and I surprised myself by accepting it. Dinner continued in a strange new quiet. Luca asked practical questions through the lens of care, not interrogation. Whether I had eaten today, whether the nausea was constant, whether Valerie should bring ginger tea later. I answered in the same honest small voice, and felt something inside me unclench. The threat outside the walls still existed, but at this table the focus shifted from debt to a heartbeat I couldn't hear yet. When the meal ended, Luca walked me back toward the east wing. His presence hovered at my shoulder like a promise and a warning. In my room, I sat on the bed with both hands on my stomach, listening to the guard's footsteps and the distant hush of the estate. My secret was no longer only mine. Luca would move pieces outside this house now, and I would have to learn how to live inside his protection, day by day, until it felt less like a cage and more like a plan. 3 weeks passed, and the East Wing stopped feeling like a hotel suite and started feeling like a schedule. Guards rotated outside my door with soft shoes and softer radios. Every latch clicked the same way, every curtain opened at the same hour, and my body learned to relax while my mind refused. How do you get used to safety when it comes with locks? When does protection become dependence? I walked the room in slow circles, one hand on my stomach, practicing calm alone. Mornings smelled of wet grass and roses, and I was allowed into the east garden only with two men trailing far enough to pretend I was free. I learned the paths that kept cameras at my back and the ones that exposed me to windows. Birds sang anyway, unaware of gates. I sipped tea because coffee turned my stomach, and I pretended this was a retreat, not exile. The fountain's water kept time better than clocks. Somewhere beyond hedges, Chicago kept breathing without me today. Valerie Romano ran the wing like an air traffic controller. She appeared before problems did, arranging meals, appointments, and quiet security shifts. She never threatened, but she never asked either. I learned which corridor curved toward Luca's office because the guard's posture changed there, shoulders squaring, eyes forward. That hallway was a border. When I drifted too close, Valerie redirected me with a polite smile that felt like steel. She showed me the phone buttons as if repetition could turn this captivity into a routine. Luca learned me in fragments, the way he probably learned cities. He noticed I could not stand the smell of red meat, and he ordered the kitchen to shift without making it a favor. He noticed I liked my tea too strong and my blankets tucked tight. In the afternoons, he drank black espresso and read documents, yet his attention kept finding me across rooms, measuring whether I was eating, sleeping, breathing. I told it was strategy, but it felt like care I never earned. 3 a.m. became my cursed hour. I would wake to silence so thick it pressed on my chest, convinced the gates had failed and danger was inside. I would sit up, hand over my belly, trying to swallow my own heartbeat. Luca always appeared within minutes, not with speeches, a just presence. He sat in the armchair, steady as a lighthouse, until my breathing matched his and sleep returned. In the morning, I hated my dependence, yet I thanked him silently for keeping us alive still. My body changed in quiet ways. At 10 weeks, my jeans felt tighter by afternoon, and my emotions moved like weather. I craved oranges, then hated them, then cried because I hated them. I caught myself saying we in my thoughts, not me, and it startled me every time. The baby was still invisible to strangers, but not to me. Every decision became a question of safety for us. Sometimes I pressed my palm to my stomach in public and pretended it was just habit. Haley Carter visited twice, escorted through gates like she was entering a foreign country. The first time she walked into the foyer, her face went pale at the guards, the cameras, the silence that listened. She hugged me too tight, like she was checking my bones. In the garden, she tried to sound normal, asking about cravings and sleep, but I heard panic beneath every careful word. She wanted to drag me home to our small apartment. I could not explain that home had moved. On her second visit, Haley's eyes caught the crowned lion crest on a folder a guard carried. I watched her freeze, then act casual too fast. Later, in a whispery tone she thought was private, she admitted she had seen that symbol on local news and neighborhood gossip. Luca Moretti was not a family friend. He was the name people lowered their voices around. My stomach dropped, because now my sister understood the danger I lived inside. I asked her to breathe and stay quiet. Before she left, Haley told me Adam had called her again and again, sounding desperate, asking where I was. Hearing that did not soften me. It made anger flare, because he searched only when it threatened him. I imagined Luca's people tightening their net outside these gates, and Adam realizing too late that his theft had a face. Haley begged me to be careful, and I promised her the only way I knew, by surviving. After she drove off, the estate felt even quieter somehow. That night, Luca found me on the balcony, watching garden lights blink like distant stars. His tone stayed calm, but I understood he was giving me notice, not permission. His mother and sister were coming soon, and a family dinner was expected. My mouth went dry. Violence I could name, But judgment from family felt like standing naked. I felt warmth too, because being introduced meant I mattered. I went to bed bracing for the knock. Tomorrow I would meet the women who shaped him. Valerie dressed me like I was walking into court, not dinner. She smoothed a sleeve, pinned back a loose strand, and watched my face the way nurses watch a fever. I kept thinking about the gates and the cameras and the baby, pressing my thoughts into a single sentence. Behave. What scares me more, enemies outside the walls or family inside them. I had no script, only my breath, my manners, and a quiet promise to stay standing. My shoes felt too loud on marble. The dining room was set for two, yet the table stretched long enough to seat a whole dynasty. Crystal caught the chandelier light and threw it back in sharp little stars. Staff moved in and out without sound, as if the house inhaled and exhaled through them. Luca sat with that measured stillness, shoulders relaxed, eyes alert. I felt my stomach tighten when I reached for water, aware that my body was now evidence. The silence between us felt louder than shouting. Not anymore. Ever. Rosalind Moretti arrived like the room belonged to her first. Silver hair, posture like iron, a gaze that took inventory without apology. Elena followed, younger, softer around the eyes, but no less aware of what she walked into. Luca rose, greeting them with an ease that told me this was family, not theater. Rosalind's attention shifted to me and held, calm and cutting, as if she could see the courthouse bench and chair stacked inside my ribs. I kept my hands folded to stop shaking. Over the first course, Rosalind asked about my life in a way that sounded polite but felt surgical. Where I grew up, what work I did, whether I had people who could support me, whether I understood what it meant to be connected to Luca. She didn't mention Adam Pierce by name, but I felt him like smoke in the corners. She studied my hands when they drifted toward my stomach, then my face when I caught myself. I answered with truth I could carry. At first I mistook Rosalind's intensity for cruelty because I was used to women smiling while they cut. Then I realized she wasn't trying to hurt me. She was measuring risk, protecting her son the way he protected everyone else. That realization stung more than insult, because it was fair. Elena offered small warmth, refilling my glass, touching my elbow as she passed, giving me a look that said I wasn't alone. Valerie hovered at the edges, ready to rescue me with a simple nod. They spoke of my pregnancy as a fact, not a scandal. Rosalind's eyes flicked once to my belly, then to Luca's face, as if confirming he truly meant what he claimed. Luca's hand appeared at my back when I shifted in my chair, steadying without pressing. I felt exposed and safe at the same time, like a wound held in clean hands. Elena asked about food I could tolerate and promised, in her attention, that someone would make sure I didn't disappear again in here. Halfway through dessert, Rosalind said my name the way a person says something they recognize, not something they learned. She asked if I had ever worked for Teresa Marino on Taylor Street, and my breath caught. She told me, with blunt nostalgia, that years ago she used to slip into that deli when Luca was young and her life was grief. Teresa fed her soup and coffee. No questions, just warmth. Rosalind looked at me and said the city remembers who keeps people alive still. After that, the questions changed. Rosalind still tested my spine, but the edge softened, like a door unlatched a fraction. She watched Luca's attention on me and seemed satisfied that he wasn't playing at devotion. When dinner ended, Elena pressed her number into my hand and made it clear she meant it as a bridge, not a formality. Rosalind hugged me briefly, firm as a verdict, and I realized I had been granted something rare in this house: permission to remain. It felt impossibly real. When the doors closed behind them, the estate seemed to exhale, and the quiet rushed back in. I walked the hallway slowly, carrying the warmth of their acceptance like glass. My fear shifted shape. I was no longer only scared of men outside the gates. I was scared of how much I wanted this belonging, Luca's hand brushed my shoulder as we passed a portrait, and my chest tightened with something that wasn't panic. I didn't want to go to bed alone with that feeling. In my room, I paused by the balcony doors and listened for distant sirens beyond the property, reminders that Adam Pierce still existed somewhere in the dark. I could feel Luca outside my door, a steady gravity I pretended not to need. I asked him to stay close for a while, not as a demand, but as a confession of weakness I was learning to accept. He didn't answer with romance, just presence, and I understood the next test would be my own heart too. After Rosalind and Elena left, the mansion felt large for my lungs. The hallway lights dimmed, and the silence pressed on my ears like water. I kept asking myself what scared me more, being taken or being chosen, and why both felt similar inside a home that was not mine. I asked Luca to stay nearby, not with words, but with the way I lingered at my doorway and could not step inside alone. He understood without making a show of it. He sat in the armchair, hands calm, eyes alert, waiting out my shaking until my breathing finally slowed. In the quiet, I told him about my mother dying when I was small, and how grief made Haley and me grow up early. I confessed that Adam trained me to accept crumbs, to call neglect normal, to believe love meant waiting for attention, until I forgot I deserved more. Luca listened like he was filing every detail away, yet his face softened around the edges. He shared enough of his own past to make it real. A father gone, a business inherited, and years of treating feelings like liabilities that could kill until I arrived and changed his math. He noticed my hand on my stomach and did not flinch from it. Instead, he asked Valerie to bring ginger tea, then waited until I sipped it. The small care felt dangerous, because it invited me to lean, and leaning was new for a woman who survived by staying alone. I kept thinking that if I leaned on him, I might never learn to stand again. Then I realized I had been standing alone for years, and it had nearly broken me. My fear was not proof of weakness. It was proof I cared about us, about tomorrow, about staying. So I moved closer first. I told him, in a trembling confession, that I was scared, and that I still wanted him near. Luca did not rush. He waited for my nod, for my breath, for my choice to hold his gaze without looking away, and then step into it fully. The kiss was gentle, more like relief than fire. It tasted like promise, and like a door opening after years of knocking. My body stopped bracing for impact. For one quiet minute, I believed I could be soft and still be safe here even with storms gathering beyond the gates. When we separated, I pressed my palm to my belly and reminded myself why I had to think clearly. Love could not erase Luca's world. It could only decide how I walked through it. I asked for patience in my own way, and he gave it without making me small. A phone vibration cut through the softness. Luca glanced at the screen, and the temperature in the room changed. His shoulders tightened, his eyes sharpened, and I felt the outside world push through our fragile bubble. I did not need details to sense danger moving closer, right toward our gates. He told me his people had found a thread leading to Adam Pierce. Not a full location, but enough to start closing doors. I saw it in his jaw, the decision forming. Adam's name felt distant, yet it still had claws in my life, and now it was being hunted. Within minutes, the estate shifted into motion. Guards changed routes. Doors that were usually quiet became checkpoints. Valerie appeared with new instructions about where I could walk and when. Nothing sounded like panic, but everything sounded like preparation. And preparation meant Luca expected impact sooner, not later for us tonight. I walked to the window after he left the room, watching security lights sweep the lawns. I felt held and hunted at the same time. Choosing Luca meant choosing his enemies too. I wondered if my baby could sense my fear, and I breathed slowly to calm us both down. I reminded myself that I was not a pawn, not even in a mansion. I was a mother in progress, and my choices had to protect a future, not just a romance. I planned boundaries in my head, small ones, real ones, so love would not erase me this time. Later, Luca returned, quieter, as if he did not want to frighten me with his war face. He touched my shoulder, then my hand, and I understood he was telling me I would be safe tonight. The calm steadied me, but it also sealed my choice deeper beyond any vow. I fell asleep before dawn, not because fear vanished, but because my body finally ran out of fuel. In the dark, I imagined the next headlines, the next knock, the next turning point. I sensed Adam's story was nearing its end, and mine was rewriting itself in real time, uninvited. Somewhere beyond the gates, men were moving, debts were being settled, and Luca's patience was turning into action. I did not know the details, only the direction. 2 months later, I would hear the news in passing and feel nothing and everything at once, like closure landing inside my chest. 2 months later, the estate felt less like a prison and more like a carefully guarded routine. I woke to soft footsteps in the hall, not alarms, and to morning light spilling across the garden. My belly was no longer a secret shape. It was a visible promise. I kept asking myself what closure feels like when you never get an apology, and whether a chapter can end without you choosing the ending for myself. Valerie measured my days with gentle precision. Breakfast I could keep down, walks when the cameras caught the safest angles, and naps when fatigue hit like a wave. Luca stayed busy, but his attention found me anyway. A hand on my lower back when I climbed stairs. A quiet check that I had eaten. Protection became background music, steady and constant, and I hated how much I started depending on it to get us through today. The news reached me the way bad weather does, through a screen left on in the sitting room. A reporter spoke about a body recovered from the Chicago River, and Adam Pierce's name crawled across the bottom banner. They called it an underworld consequence, another criminal debt paid in silence. I stood there with a teacup cooling in my hands, waiting for pain to arrive. Instead, I felt a dull click, like a latch closing. No grief rose up. No satisfaction either. Just a clean emptiness that surprised me. Adam had taken years of my life without ever truly seeing me, had taken my sense of safety, my ability to trust my own judgment. He never earned the right to know about this baby, and yet part of me mourned the simplicity of hating him. Numbness, I realized, was a kind of healing that let me breathe without looking back. Later, Luca found me on the terrace, my palms spread over my bump as if I could shield it from headlines. He did not offer speeches. He simply stood close, a steady presence while my thoughts settled. He scheduled appointments, adjusted security, asked Valerie to keep my sister updated without revealing details. I wrestled with the moral weight of his world, but I could not deny the gentleness he kept giving us when it mattered. A week after the headline, we went back to Cook County Courthouse. No fanfare, no white dress, and just paperwork and a clerk who did not look up. I signed forms that protected my address and severed my last legal tether to Adam. The same hallway smelled of old paper, but this time I was not alone on that bench. Luca waited nearby, quiet, letting the choice be mine, and I felt spines straighten for us. On the courthouse steps, I remembered the day Adam skipped our ending and left me holding a secret in my purse. Now the secret lived in my body, and the ending belonged to me. I still feared Luca's power, but I no longer feared my own voice. Haley called that evening and cried with relief when she heard I sounded steady. I told myself steadiness was not the absence of fear, but direction for us. The next week, Dr. DeSantis asked for extra monitoring, his tone careful enough to wake my panic. One afternoon, I felt a sudden tightness. Not pain exactly, just a warning that made me stop breathing. Valerie guided me to a chair, Luca appeared faster than I expected, and the moment passed, leaving me shaky and angry at my own body. The doctor said it could mean an early arrival, and the clock moved forward again. That night, I lay awake, hands curved around my stomach, listening to guards outside and wind inside trees. I could not control when my baby would come, or what debts still lingered in Luca's world, but I could choose how we met the moment. I chose breathing over spirals. I chose asking for help instead of pretending strength. And I chose Luca beside me, not as an owner, but as the person who showed up. In the nursery Valerie was preparing, I stood among soft blankets and a waiting crib and tried to picture a tiny face. The walls were painted gentle yellow, unlike morning trapped indoors. Luca's hand covered mine on my belly, grounding me. The river had taken Adam Pierce, but it had not taken my future. Something new was coming sooner than planned. I breathed, held my choice, and waited for the moment our baby would arrive. That night, the waiting stopped. I woke with a tight, undeniable signal that my body had switched from someday to now, and I lay still for one breath, listening to the estate's silence. How do you step into motherhood when you still feel like you are healing? Can something born from chaos become something pure? My hand found my belly, and I whispered my name inside my head, not for courage, but for focus. Claire. Us. Within minutes, the fortress became a clinic, a command post, a nest. Valerie moved like a metronome, calling the right people, laying out towels, unchecking doors, making sure my sister was notified without letting panic spill into my face. Guards opened gates and cleared the drive. Luca appeared in the doorway already dressed, eyes steady, voice low enough to calm without asking me to be brave. He did not promise miracles. He promised presence. Time fractured into small tasks. Breathe, drink water, keep my shoulders loose. Remember I was not alone. Every fear tried to sprint ahead, imagining worst endings. But Luca kept pulling me back to the next minute. He held my hand when I reached for it, then let go when I needed space, treating my consent like the real lock on this door. I watched his calm travel through the room, turning urgency into order. When the moment arrived, it was both ordinary and impossible. I remember sound more than sight, in the first thin cry cutting through my exhaustion like a light. My whole body shook with relief, and tears came hard, not from pain, but from disbelief that I had survived the courthouse, the kidnapping, the lies, and still earned this beginning. I kept thinking, this is real, this is ours, this is happening. Later, wrapped in clean blankets and quiet, I stared at my daughter's face and felt my life redraw itself. 2 months earlier, I had been a woman on a bench, signing my name into loneliness. Now I was a mother, breathing in the sweet milk scent of a tiny person who didn't know fear yet. Luca stayed close, not crowding, just making a safe circle around us until my heartbeat stopped racing. Haley arrived later with red eyes and slow steps, and even Luca's guards softened for her. She placed a knitted hat in my palm, R made by Nonna Teresa, and I felt the city's kindness loop back again. Back at the estate, the nursery waited exactly as Valerie promised, soft yellow walls and a crib built like a promise. A small mobile turned slowly, and for the first time the house felt less like surveillance and more like preparation. I sat in the rocker with my daughter against my chest, listening to the muffled footsteps outside the door, and realizing they sounded different now. Protective instead of prison-like. Luca held her the way you hold something sacred and fragile, hands careful, shoulders strangely soft. He didn't need blood to claim responsibility. He had already done that in every quiet decision, every doctor visit, every sleepless 3 a.m. he spent keeping my fear from swallowing me. Watching him look at her, I understood chosen family isn't a slogan. It is a series of acts, repeated until they become home. I was still scared of motherhood, of Luca's world, of losing what we had built in a house that could turn cold with one phone call. But I was also happy in a way that felt improbable, like sunlight after a long storm. I learned that safety doesn't always arrive wearing softness. Sometimes it arrives wearing power, and you have to decide if you trust the hands holding it. I thought about Adam once, briefly, like you think about a burned-out house you no longer live in. He was gone, and his absence no longer defined me. What defined me was choice. Choosing truth. Choosing boundaries. Choosing to let someone love me without erasing myself. The courthouse had been my ending, but it had also been the doorway to this beginning. The world might call this a cage. I called it a sanctuary. If you've ever had to choose between freedom that feels lonely and safety that feels risky, I'd love to hear what you chose and why. What does home mean to you? A place, a person, or a promise you make to yourself? If this story moved you, please like, share, and comment, because your words help these stories find the people who need them.